Hi everyone, this is Elena of the Witches Box, and I'm here today with another episode of Witch BookTube. And today it's a little bit of a deviation from where we've been. I know that the last video we did was a book haul for this month of October, and then I had been on an ancestral book track. I took a quick deviation because the books that I'm reading on ancestor work are pretty dense right now, although very, very good, and I hope to get into one, if not two of those next week. But these books sort of tie into that a little bit for me personally, so I'll get into that when I talk about the books. And there are two books today. One is called Oshun, Santeria, and the Orishas of Love, Rivers, and Sensuality by Baba Raul Canizares. And the other one is Yemaya Santeria and the Queen of the Seven Seas. You got the two artwork there. They're both by the same author. Super skinny, super teeny. I don't even think it took me an hour to read each of these. And I mentioned these books in the book haul for, I believe it was September. These were impulse buys. I don't even know why they came up. I was scrolling through Amazon and I got lost down some track because I am a consummate, it's not a window shopper, but I guess I'm an online shopper where I just add things to my wish list for future reference. And these two were there. And I just had the urge to get them for many, many reasons that I'm going to get into that have nothing to do with the review, but it's part of the experience, and it's also part of this deeper focus on ancestral work that I've been on for the last couple of months in preparation for this October box, as well as just my own continued deepening. Many of you know, some of you don't. I am Cuban American. My parents were Cuban refugees during the revolution in the early 60s, late 50s. And I grew up in a household where my father was a practicing santero. And so my home life, my growing up was very, very rich in that tradition, in that worship, in the altars, the magic, the pantheon, all of it. And yet it was something that I never fully related to, which is so interesting because I was always, from the very, very beginning, drawn to the idea of being a witch, the idea of magic. My spiritual journey is long and curvaceous because I took some detours along the way, but for whatever reason, my reclamation and my ownership of me being a witch, which happened in my mid-20s, just never included this aspect, which is interesting for a million reasons, and sometimes not, right? I have some understanding as to what that's about. In any case, my father passed away 23 years ago. It's been a while, and there is this renewal of, I don't even know what it is. In all of this reading, there's definitely a renewal of pull. Like I feel that deep pull that oftentimes I've ignored in working with my ancestors because I have challenges around like my recent lineage to maybe 3 or 4 generations back. For many reasons, maybe I'll get into it at some point, maybe I won't, I don't know. So all of this reading has just continued to pull up a lot of insight as to why that is and also what needs to happen to work through that. We're talking a lot now in the next couple of books about doing lineage healing and how important that is, not just to those who came before you, but to you and those who are coming after you. It's really deep and sacred work. And so it's interesting that there are things that I'm constantly tapped into in terms of my history and the nostalgia of the home that I grew up in and my recent culture, right? Because yes, I'm American. I was born in the United States, but I was raised in a bicultural home where it was all Cuban. It was all steeped in that. And then when I left the home, like to go to school, every day, I was in a completely different culture. So I always felt like I was kind of holding a foot in each world. There is some part of me that still longs for that part to be fed, even though I'm now in a completely immersive American life, right? My dad passed, my mom has got advanced dementia. We really don't have a cohesive home life. So I go through periods where I'm nostalgic, but never in terms of going back to this. There's so much about Santeria that is just a familiarity that's cellular for me. It always feels very sweet, very just anchoring, even though still it's not something I'm called to practice. So it's an interesting place to hold. And this video isn't all about that, but anyway, that's why these books came up to read, and they're really small, but what I loved about them, here's what I'm going to say. Let me just give you a review. A lot of these books, unfortunately, that are like this, that are about voodoo or root work, or I'm going to maybe get some slack about saying what I'm about to say. Santeria, Lokumi, like all of these different books tend to be low production books. They're not really supported by good editing. They don't read clearly for whatever reason. I think that sadly there just doesn't seem to be a lot of big publishers picking these books up and putting them out into the world. So people are self-publishing a lot of the times, and they just don't feel polished enough to feel like an easy read. This is not the case with these two books. So boom, I want to just put that out there. The writer, who is Baba Raul Canizares, I couldn't find a bio for him readily. These are really well written. They're very clear. They're easy to read. They're fairly informative. I'm going to say that they're definitely not beginners, but it's almost like an entire book, not an entire book, but a book dedicated to specific correspondences to each of these goddesses or each of these Orishas. And in the very first half of each of these books, you get a series of patakis, which are oral traditional stories about each of these goddesses or Orishas. Similar to what I love so much about everything that Clarissa Pinkola Estes does, but specifically in her book, Women Who Run with the Wolves, where she gives you a beautiful fairy tale or a mythology, and then she goes through the breakdown and the analysis of what that means in terms, specifically with her, about archetypes and our psychology and our inner makings. This book does that, but on a very teeny scale and not from the perspective of Jungian archetypes, right? But you'll get a pataki or an oral tradition story or an origin story to that deity, and then he will do a little analysis of what that means and how that relates to us. He talks a lot about how Santeria came to be in terms of the history of the slaves coming from Nigeria into Cuba and the Caribbean as part of the slave trade, and then the amalgamation of religions that created Santeria. So you've got Yoruban religion that then mixed with Catholicism and what that ended up being, which is what Santeria is. He speaks a little bit about what that might look like too in Brazil, because Brazil had the same type of history, although there's a little difference. There's probably quite a bit of difference between how people in Brazil worship as opposed to those in Cuba. So you get a nice chunk of information in a very small book, and then after he goes through the history and the patakis, he'll go into the different paths for each Orisha that you can follow, the colors, attributes, and different spells. Really quick, really easy to read. Again, less than an hour for each, maybe an hour if you take a little longer. It was nice. For me, the experience wasn't really educational as much as it was like an indulgence in hearing words and language that is just so, I think, embedded in my DNA because it's part of my makings. So how does this tie in for me with ancestral work? Very few of us have a very clear cultural lineage, right? Especially if you're from the West in the United States. We are all a mixture of all sorts of things, particularly too if you are like, really, my lineage is much more deeply steeped in Spain and in Spaniard blood as opposed to Cuban, because my grandparents had immigrated from Spain to Cuba, and my parents were born in Cuba. So to me, that, even though it is the culture that I know and that I live and that still comes out every once in a while when I'm feeling a little feisty, it is a recent part of my lineage. My parents were born there, but my grandparents weren't. And I've always felt a draw to things that are Celtic, things that are of a completely different culture than I know readily. So I've always found that interesting, and I'm not quite sure what that's about, but my draw is to something other than this recent history. And I think that there is a lot of reason for that, much more so than the reason that I originally thought, which was that in my experience of Santeria, it was a very patriarchal religion for me. It gave very little space, particularly I think because of the Catholicism that is so deeply influencing of Santeria. What I'm reading in these books is different than my experience, which is they're saying that it's very open to women being spiritual leaders in the community. I didn't have that experience, and it was always a turnoff for me even as a young child, because I always felt like, why can't I have as deep a connection to the divine as the men who are spiritual leaders in our community? It was always part of my rebellion, my like, this is not the call that I feel. In any case, that's always been the reason I've thought it just doesn't call to me. It doesn't speak to this thing that I feel within me that's drawing me in. What I'm recognizing now when I'm doing more ancestral work, as well as dipping into Santeria as a way to indulge in my need for nostalgia and love and even missing my father, what I'm recognizing is that there are a bunch of layers. Like, this is really not the religion of our lineage, right? And though my father was so deeply steeped in it, it was really only him, and my mom just kind of dipped in and out. She was never really fully committed. There is this understanding at this point for me that even though it was so much a part of my, like, there's so much that is so familiar, even things that I don't fully understand or was educated on. If I hear a word or I hear a phrase or I hear a language that isn't even Spanish related to Santeria, like, some part of me just kind of turns on, like I recognize it on a deep cellular level, and yet I just have this sensation that this is not the gods, these are not the gods of my people. And so it's really interesting to me how that perspective has changed. So listen, let me back it up. If you are interested in understanding Santeria more, if you're interested in Oshun or Yemaya and what they represent and their powers and these beautiful stories, the stories are beautiful. Go for it. Check them out. I give these both a 3. I wish that they were longer, that they were deeper. There's so much that can happen in terms of sharing more information here. But in terms of what the books set out to be, they're great bite-sized morsels to give you a deeper understanding of the culture, which I think is important because so much of us are reading about these deities, these Orishas, from a perspective that is not of that culture. Raul Canizares is. So it's always great to get it from the mouths of people who are steeped and rooted in that context, in that culture. So for that, I definitely recommend them if these are things that interest you, if you are called or you're feeling a curiosity for both of these deities or Orishas. I definitely buy them. They're super inexpensive. I think $6.95 each. And again, quick reads. And thank you for indulging me in my exploration. It was an interesting experience for me, if only just to inquire a little deeper about why I haven't gone in this direction and also what feelings it brings up. And it was just really enjoyable. It was enjoyable, and it was almost paying an homage to my father and just that piece of our history, even though I feel like it's really not our lineage. So there you go. So the next week that we have coming up is going to be probably 2 books on ancestral work. Since we're in it, the boxes for the ancestral work has already gone out, I think as of, oh yeah, no, for sure. They're going out today, and this video is going to go live in a few days. So those books are out. I have to say this to you because I always feel so stressed about this. So our October box is on ancestral work. It's the first ritual part of a second part that we will talk about in the deep dive. Here's what I'm going to say. I always try to get extra boxes because there's always extra sales at the end of a subscription run, and also because it's always good to have an extra bit in case something goes wrong in shipping and all of these things. But we don't have a lot of these boxes, and I always feel a pressure because there's been an onslaught of, hey, I really want this box even though I wasn't subscribed and I really want it. Can you let me know? Can you let me know? These are going to run out really fast. So we're all going to be okay with that. And what I want to say is this. Single boxes cost $89. If you subscribe, you get the box for $75. I highly recommend that you subscribe and not miss these out, because we're getting more and more and more commentary about I'm missing out, you sell out really fast. Listen, if you subscribe, they won't sell out because I always make enough to cover at least as many as have subscribed, and then I'll make a couple of extra or more depending on what I can get out there and what I can source and what's happening in that month. So subscribe. Subscribe, if only to just please not have this experience of these boxes are going away so quickly. Last month's box, September, the Cauldron box, that baby sold out in a day, a day. And then because we're overgrown now in the small space that we are packaging these boxes in, through the cleaning out and kind of reorganizing before we move to a bigger space, I found one more, and that sucker was gone in 20 minutes. And I didn't even announce it. I just kind of put it on, and I don't know how they found it, but someone clicked on it, bought it, and it's gone. So because I don't want to disappoint, and I would definitely want to include as many of you in all of these experiences as possible, subscribe to the box, because when these are gone, they're gone, and I'm just not going to repeat them once they're sold out. So there's that. The other thing that is an announcement, you're going to hear it here first. The email won't go out announcing this until next week. So because my aim here is to create as big and as cohesive and as amazing a community as I can. You know that for the Witches book subscription, we also have the Witches Book Coven. So that means that if you subscribe to the books, you also get admittance into the private forum, so we can all talk on the daily, or however often you want. We can talk about the books and what we're learning and what's going on in our reading for each month, which is exciting to me because I really wanted to have a robust forum for us to like privately get together and start not only communicating further and deeper about the things that we're learning, because you really can't do that on social media, but I've also wanted to do that in order to have all of you start communicating with each other. I really want to facilitate all of you creating lasting, deep, meaningful connections with fellow witches, because so many of you are alone, like you're practicing alone. You don't have a community readily available or close to you that you can engage in. And even though the internet is not a full-on substitute for human face-to-face, in your own space connection with someone else, we got to work with what we've got. And I really want to start somewhere. So we have that for the book subscription. And at the deep dive for the box subscription last month, because when you subscribe to the box, you also get access to, at the end of the month, we do a live online gathering where we talk more about how to use the box, what the magic involved in that is, and learn more about what you can do with the tools that you got. We are now adding, at that deep dive, we decided just on the spot, we are just going to create and offer a forum for those of you who are part of the box as well, because we all need to have community. So this means that if you're subscribed to the box, you're going to get the box, you have access to the deep dive that month, and you're also going to be part of the deep dive forum, so that throughout the entire month, once you get the box, if you have questions, if you need to know, what do I do with this, and I don't know how to use a sigil, or what if I can't do the ritual in this way, you have not only me to talk to, and Elliot and Tree, but also you can talk with one another and share ideas and share your experiences, because I'm also really interested in learning about your real life experience with each of these rituals and spells and how those are working for you. And this is a perfect place to do that. So all of those words to say that we've added a new layer to the box. So please subscribe, because it's a really exciting time. Things are growing and I'm trying to layer more and more into it where you get access to the connection. I think that more than anything, yes, it's so fun. It's so cool to get a box in the mail every month with some cool, beautiful ritual items. But more than my purpose is to create this magical living web across the globe of witches who are communicating with one another, who are learning together, who are on the same page month to month with specific themes in witchcraft to practice, grow, and learn through. So you had your review. I'm telling you, subscribe to the box. And if you have any questions about that, just go ahead and leave them down below and let me know what you think. And stay tuned, because next week the official announcement about that addition to the box is going to go live. And I'm excited about that because selfishly, full-on self-disclosure, I just want to spend time hanging out with you guys in an environment that feels conducive to deep conversation and not just the super quick chatter that happens on social media, which is what it's there for. It's there for super quick chatter. It's not there for deep connection. It's not there for like deep involved conversations that can take our spirituality into deeper realms. So that is what I'm trying to create. I want to invite you to be part of that, and I will see you there. Blessed be.